Hi, everyone. My name's Andrew Klopstein. I am the Assistant Director for Off-Campus Student Living here at Boston College. And I'd like to welcome you to the first ever virtual off-campus housing fair. We've been running the housing fair for graduate and law students for several years now, but never before in a virtual format. So I'm excited to kind of run through this with you. Let's do a couple of introductions and then we will get started here. So again, as I said, my name is Andrew Klopstein. Pronouns are he, him, his. Again, also, I'm the Assistant Director for Off-Campus Student Living here at Boston College. I'm from St. Louis originally, and I'm currently pursuing my MBA here at the university. I'm entering my 6th year as well this July, which is crazy to think about. I'd like to now turn it over to my colleague, Melissa, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa, and I am the Graduate Resident Director for the Vandy and 90 St. Thomas More community. I'm currently going to be a second year in the master's program here at BC, the Master's in Higher Ed. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm originally from New York, but grew up in Somerset, Massachusetts, which is about an hour from here. I've been at BC for about a year now and working for the office for a little bit.
Wonderful. We would like to start off with our student panel. However, I'm just going to touch briefly on some of the things that off-campus student living offers. And before I even do that, I'd like to wish you a happy Pride Month as well as a happy Juneteenth on this Friday. So off-campus student living, what we really do is help students through the off-campus search process, provide some guidance and assistance, and really support you as much as we can in your search, knowing that the search can be long and it can be stressful. And so we're here to kind of assist you in all of those things. The biggest resource that we have is our off-campus housing database, which I'm actually going to show you briefly right now before we get started with our student panel. So give me 1 second here to switch on over. So you should be seeing here the off-campus housing database, and you all as students have full access to this database. You just go in and click this will be a sign in. I'm already logged in. You log in with your Agora portal credentials. Once you receive those, sometimes there's a little bit of a delay between when a student officially accepts their offer to attend Boston College and when they are populated in our system, in our internal database, in which you get your username and password. At any rate, if you don't have your Agora portal credentials yet, you can request a guest account and we will go ahead and approve that account. But there you're going to be able to search for housing by clicking the housing tab, and you'll be able to see a whole number of listings here in our area and throughout Boston. Something that makes our site unique, however, is that it's customized specifically to BC. You can search based on how many miles from campus you are and a whole number of things by going down here to this My Filters button. You also can see virtual tours. We've upgraded pictures for virtual showings in the time of COVID-19. So again, it functions similarly to how a normal apartment search rental database will function. And yet we also have this roommates tab here. And this roommates tab is really an opportunity for you to connect with potential roommates at Boston College and at other neighboring institutions who use the same platform as us. You can create this profile if you're looking for a roommate and you have a place. You can create this profile in the sense that you have a place and are looking for a roommate to move in and live with you. Or you can just connect with students that may want to enter an entire lease agreement together. The last thing that we have here that I wanted to touch on is our resources tab. It's chock full of stuff with links and good information. I'm not going to scroll through many of these. One I would like to point out to you is our rental cost comparison, which is this third link under tenant resources. It's going to break down exactly what you might expect to pay for an off-campus apartment in the city of Boston and neighboring municipalities. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And we also have some agent and broker information. So that's kind of a brief overview of what we offer, and we'll touch on some other things about the general off-campus search here as we go through our program. But in the meantime, I'd like to turn it on over to our student panel, and I will switch back to our presentation here. So we have three folks joining us today: Chamba Mueli, John Riley, and Shannon Poppy-Zaruba. Chamba is a graduate of Boston College from this past May. John is a current law student, and Shannon graduated from BC and also lived off campus in her time at the institution. So if those folks wouldn't mind turning on your cameras, and we will start with Chamba. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about yourself, and we will start that. Chamba, you there?
She's muted, I think.
I think you're still on mute, Chamba.
Hello? That was funny. I was just talking to myself. Okay, let's try this again. Hi, everyone. My name's Chamba Muele. I'm originally from California. So I moved from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, if anyone has any questions about that. Like Andrew said, I recently graduated in May. I was part of the mental health counseling program through the Lynch School of Education and Human Development. And I've lived off campus for the last 2 years. When I was in the program, I lived near Cleveland Circle, so in between a bunch of bus stops. And I've really enjoyed my time living off campus, in Boston. There's just a lot of places to see, restaurants to sit at and eat, all these different activities. So I've really enjoyed my time living off campus.
Thanks so much, Chamba. John, if you wouldn't mind now introducing yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is John Riley. First off, congratulations on your acceptance and attending BC this fall. We're all really excited to have you here with us. I am a second-year law student, as Andrew said, originally from Albany, New York. This will be my second year living in Boston. It's a great city. I live currently, and I'm coming to you live from my apartment on South Street, which is right behind the main campus in the Cleveland Circle, Brighton area. So if you have any questions on the commute to law school or where law students generally live, please feel free to direct those at me. Again, congratulations, and looking forward to talking with you throughout the rest of the panel.
Thanks so much, John. And Shannon, I believe you're up. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
So good afternoon, everybody, and I'd like to echo John's sentiment. Congratulations. We're really excited to have you at Boston College in the fall, whatever the fall looks like. As Andrew said, my name is Shannon Poppy-Zaruba. I use pronouns she, her, hers, and I graduated in 2019 with my master's in higher education. During that time, I lived off campus in the Allston-Brighton area, so I was really fortunate. I was right in between the Cambridge, like the red line stops, and then the green line as well. So lots of options to go lots of places, but still about a 20-minute T ride, like 10-minute drive. I had a car, but my roommate didn't. And so finding an apartment that accommodated both of those things was a journey, but we did it. And I did also enjoy my time off campus as well.
Thanks so much, Shannon. So before we jump into any questions, I just want to set some rules of the road here. If everyone wouldn't mind just keeping your microphones on mute, you're welcome to have your video on, but if you're moving around, it can be distracting sometimes. So go ahead and mute your video then as well. The other thing is that if you wouldn't mind, if you have any questions, directing those to Melissa in the chat function. She's going to be kind of managing all of the questions that are submitted. And you did have an opportunity to pre-submit questions. We've included those in the questions that we're hoping to ask our panelists today, but certainly we'll provide space for you to ask any that come up, because when you submitted those, you might have been in a different space than you are today. So with that, I want to start with a quick poll here. So everybody look alive. I'm going to try this poll here. I just want to kind of get a sense of your housing search status so that we can know where you're kind of at as we address these questions. So where are you currently at in your housing search? You're still looking for housing. I found a place to live, but I'm looking for roommates. I found a group of roommates, but we're looking for housing. I found a place to live with a group of roommates, but we haven't signed our lease yet. And we successfully found a spot with roommates. Congratulations if you fall into that category. So it looks like the majority of us, 78% or so, are currently still looking for housing and roommates. So I hope that that brief walkthrough was helpful, and ideally this student panel, the student experience panel, will be helpful as well. So I'm gonna start us off with some questions. We'll end this poll, and let's see here. Give me 1 second, 1 moment. There we are. All right, so our first question really is general. The category is searching for an apartment. So anybody, if anybody would like to jump in of our 3 panelists, what advice do you have for searching for an apartment? And what might you have done differently in your first apartment search compared to one you've done since, or in looking back on that first apartment search?
Andrew, I'm happy to start. I think one mistake I don't know that people can have at this point was that I really did start too early. I started in April, and looking for August leases was pretty challenging, considering a lot of those come up through like a sublet lens. The way that my program started, I was working in Res Life at the time, and so I had to be back on campus and in the Boston area by August 1st. And so most of the leases in the Boston area run, as I'm sure you have all seen, mostly on a September 1st cycle. So really like knowing what my job requirements had to be and when I had to show up uh, really limited that. As we got closer, more opportunities did start to show up. I used I used the off-campus housing website. I used a lot of the Facebook groups, and then ultimately my roommate was the one who found our lease. But we worked together for a while to try and find all of the things that we needed that were in our budget, and it got frustrating at times, especially when we started too early, because it was kind of disheartening to see that there was nothing there. But as we got closer, everything started to pop up. There were more than one option, and at the end of it, we had an option between 2 pretty good places.
Thank you, Shannon.
I think I had a slightly atypical story. I made the decision to come to BC Law fairly late in the process, so I didn't sign a lease until very shortly before first year orientation. That's something I wouldn't recommend, but as Shannon was saying, you can definitely start searching too early. A lot of landlords don't know if their tenants are re-upping their lease until May or even June. So if you are worried, you don't have a roommate, you don't have a housing yet, don't worry at this point. You still have 2 months before school starts at least. There will be more openings coming in the next few days and weeks. So July, early August are perfectly fine times to look. I'd also echo how great the BC off-campus housing portal is. I found a roommate on there, found great housing options. It's super easy to use and navigate. I find it way simpler to use than like a Zillow or other comparable rental search sites. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely this weekend when you get a chance, take a look at the off-campus housing portal.
Thank you for that plug, John. I really appreciate it. And for pointing out the timeline at which students should be searching for housing. I think you're spot on, and Shannon as well. Starting early can be problematic, and panicking right now I don't think is probably as necessary. So thank you very much for those thoughts.
I would say the apartment search was, like John said, atypical. I really want to highlight about finding your roommates or a group of people to live with first before starting the housing search, just so you understand or know what amenities you like, what you want in an apartment, what do you want in a roommate. It's just really important to have those conversations before starting the search, so that way you all are on the same page about what kind of apartment style or house style you want, on top of you all have agreed on financial support or assistance. And so that's really smooth once you're able to sign an application. That is just only takes a couple of days versus back and forth. And so really finding your roommates, having those conversations and being on the same page before the search is my biggest recommendation.
Thanks, Chamba. And everyone, I failed to give Chamba a shout out. Chamba is my former graduate assistant in off-campus student living. So Chamba is an expert here, and we're grateful to have her on the panel today. The next question generally is, what common neighborhoods are good places for graduate students to look living?
I really can't advocate enough for the Alston-Brighton area. I enjoyed my time so much. There are a ton of like little unique shops, particularly on Cambridge and like Brighton Ave. I think it's Brighton Avenue. Lots of little brunch places. I could walk everywhere if I wanted to, but there was like still parking. I don't think I mentioned this. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. There are like way more parking lots out there. That was something that took some adjusting when I came to the Boston area, but I loved it. I live next to a church, so my neighbors were really great. And then just as far as like ability to get other places in Boston, it was really connected with public transit.
I would also second Alston and Brighton as great neighborhoods for grad students to live in. Especially the Cleveland Circle area seems very popular with incoming law students because you're close to campus and also you have easy access to public transportation as well. Because the law campus is in Newton, which is a little further outside of downtown Boston, it's more common to find law students living in the Newton or Chestnut Hill areas. So I'd also recommend, if you are going to be a first-year law student, to expand your search to things that are a little bit closer to the law campus, which makes the commute when you have an 8 a.m. contracts class on Friday mornings a little bit easier.
No doubt, no doubt.
I really enjoy living near Cleveland Circle, but just from working with off campus, it's just really important to think about your transportation and really look at your classes, because if you have early morning classes, for instance, and the commute is far, that's just less time for you throughout the day, and you have to count in transportation. And so I, for instance, really wanted to live near a bus stop so that I could use the bus that BC offers for free, the BC shuttle. It runs early in the morning to late in the evening, so that was really important for me because I worked early and then my classes were until 9:30 p.m. And so if you don't have a car, you're going to be really reliant on transportation. I would look into being near a bus stop or at least a train line. Specifically the Green Line, B line specifically, because it goes straight into Boston College. So those are my suggestions.
Thank you very much, Chamba. And that transportation point, there's a lot of good resources on our website in the frequently asked questions section, as well as on the off-campus housing database under the resources tab that we showed you. And of course, you can check out the Parking and Transportation's website as well for the shuttle routes and things like that. The next question that we have here, we're going to move on to the roommates portion of the panel, is, in your opinion, what's the ideal number of roommates?
2 max. So yeah, I would say 2 max. The more roommates, just, more people, just more opinions, more, more maybe concerns, more problems maybe. I think 2 is a really good amount. It's nice. And a lot of apartments are either 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms too. And so not having to look for extra rooms or live in houses is really nice if you're trying to find an apartment that includes all the amenities and, in-unit laundry and all that kind of stuff. And so I would say a smaller group is is best?
I would say 2 per bathroom. So if you have 2 people and 1 bathroom, great. If you have 2 bathrooms, you can have 4 people, but any more than that, and mornings start to get really tricky.
I'd also agree 2, I think, is the optimal number of roommates as well. When I was an undergrad, I had 5 roommates, and I think you can only imagine how messy an apartment with 6 guys who are in their early 20s can get. So I wouldn't recommend that many, and I believe there's a max on 4 individuals in a Boston apartment living together who aren't related anyways. So max, you're looking at 3 roommates. It is nice to have more than one, though, especially based on the social distancing regulations. It's nice to be able to interact with people when you're otherwise shut in by yourself. So I definitely recommend at least 1 and 2 if you have that option.
Thank you for mentioning the city ordinance of no more than 4. So John's absolutely right. In Boston, no more than 4 unrelated people are allowed to live in an apartment together. If you have additional questions about that ordinance, please reach out to us at offcampus@bc.edu. All right, great. So the next question here is just around upfront costs. We get this question a lot. What did you personally have to pay for your apartment upfront? It can be a short, sweet answer.
First month, last month, security deposit, agent fee, if there is one. And Andrew can talk about how that could be negotiable, and maybe an application fee.
We found our apartment in an informal manner, so we didn't have an agent or a broker, so we didn't have to pay that fee. But correct, first, last, security, the application fee, and then also we had to pay August upfront because we were technically subletting, and so that also came out all at one time.
Yeah, so that broker's fee is, if you use a rental agency, is something that you would be asked to pay up to 1 full month's rent up front. So if you're looking to use an agent, you need to know that that is something that you would be expected to pay. That fee is negotiable. You're able to negotiate that. Whether or not the agency is willing to do that is a different story, however. So please know that. We'll jump on to our next section here because we want to also have time for students to ask the questions that they've submitted. So paying bills, just a general question again that we get pretty often is, what utilities do you pay for and what utilities does your landlord pay for, if any? And I guess we could also generally throw in general, what would those bills come out to be, particularly around the winter months when you need heat?
So thankfully, our landlords cover trash, water, heat. And so during the winter, we really don't need to worry about how long we have our heat for because we're not paying for that. But we do pay for electricity and gas and internet.
I had the same. And we had gas heat, and so our gas bill would go up pretty significantly in the winters. So definitely don't base your budget on what your roommates or what the people say that you're moving in with pay in the summer, because that definitely fluctuates depending on the weather.
I definitely recommend being active in looking for internet packages as well, especially I'm assuming a lot of us are going to be doing a substantial amount of work from home. And if you do have 2 or 3 roommates, you're going to really want a good internet deal or the best you can find. I know a lot of companies may offer student discounts, so definitely look into that. One other cost you might want to be aware of is just the upfront moving costs. If you need to rent a moving truck or need to hire movers to help move a couch or a bed. That's something we didn't think we were going to need, but had to add on at the last minute last year. So just keep that in mind too when you're budgeting for the fall.
Great. And one thing to note about, especially around heat, is that In standalone houses or apartments that are duplexes or triplexes, it's likely that you will have to pay for the heat that you use, and it will not be provided, or excuse me, it will not be paid for by the landlord. Sometimes in the larger apartment complexes that can be included, but it would again vary based on apartment complex that you're looking for. So, you know, whatever is separately metered is technically the term there in the lease agreement can be charged to the tenant. And anytime you're living in a standalone house or a duplex, triplex, that is most likely to be separately metered. Great, thanks so much, y'all. We're about halfway through some of our prepared questions here. We want to talk about move-in, and John, you kind of alluded to the move-in costs. The typical question that we get is, school starts before September 1st, and most Boston leases start on September 1st. So how do you all manage that? How did you navigate that?
It's a great and definitely a difficult question, and one that I had trouble figuring out last year, especially this year. September 1st is a Tuesday, I believe. And I don't think many people want to try to move in on a Tuesday afternoon after a full day of work or classes. I know some landlords and some apartments will offer either an August 1st move-in, but if you do have that September 1st date, you can try to see if there's an early move-in period at all where you might have to pay a prorated fee for the week or 3 days that you would be moving in early. If you're not able to do that and you are starting class prior to that September 1st move-in date, uh, you know, you might have to find alternative housing for a few days before you're able to move into your apartment. And one of the things at the law school we want to do is, if you are an incoming first year law student and you don't have housing for a short period of time before your new lease starts on September 1st, reach out to us, reach out to the law school student government, and we can try to set you up with a current student who would have a spare bed or a blow-up mattress for you to crash on for a few days before you can officially move in.
Like I mentioned, my lease started on August 1st just because our training started on August 5th. And so that was a non-negotiable for us. And so truthfully, that did weed out a lot of apartments. And it definitely lengthened the timeline that we were looking for apartments, just because not all of them had August 1st start dates. But we ended up subletting from the people who were there before us. And so it was a really nice transition. I did have a friend who had an Airbnb in between those couple of weeks where she was working, or she was still in the Boston area but wasn't able to move into her full-time apartment. It worked for her. I don't know that she would recommend that, but worst comes to worst, that was an option that she was able to use.
Shannon, thank you for bringing up about the Airbnb, because my roommates and I actually did that. We had a September 1st move-in date, and so if you have roommates, it's really great because you can look for an Airbnb together and split the costs, which would be a lot cheaper, possibly, you know, adding 2 to 3 people versus you just paying for your own Airbnb. But it was really nice because we were able to store some of our things at the Airbnb. And once it was time to move, we were all able to move together, which actually helped the moving process go a bit more smooth versus doing it alone. And so I definitely recommend Airbnbs if you know anyone that lives nearby that can, like John said, like house you for a couple of days. Highly recommend it.
Those are all really good resources. And one thing, this is a common problem that our undergraduate students face a lot. And we always recommend that you start with the landlord and see if you can arrive early, which may be a possibility. You never know until you ask. So please inquire about that. I think we are going to, let's continue on to this next question about landlord and property manager responsiveness. So a question that not many students think about initially, but sometimes comes up once a lease begins. Have you ever had an issue where you had to contact your landlord or property manager about? And if so, can you talk about it and tell us how they responded to that issue?
So our landlord, his name was Jack. He's a lovely individual. Had a group chat with our with our apartment unit, and he was the landlord of a couple different spaces in that building, and so he would let us know when it was our turn to take out the trash. So he was a pretty consistent communicator, which made it really easy. We would just text him when we had issues. My heat for a little while wasn't working fully, and so he was there the next day to make sure that that was up to date. Um, and then if anything like still wasn't working, we would just text him again. It was a pretty informal system, but he was always really responsive and would always give us notice if he was going to be stopping by with a contractor or somebody to make sure that like either somebody was home or like he knew that we would be there without being present.
Yeah, my landlord or my property managers are very responsive. We choose to email them instead of text messaging them, but either one is totally fine. And we actually had an issue last year with our oven and our dishwasher, and they actually replaced the dishwasher completely. So that was super nice. And we also had like a rat problem. Sorry, I have to say it. It's common in Boston. And they were so responsive. They would bring out different types of, techniques or, tools to really help us, minimize the rat problem, which actually worked. And this year we didn't have any rat issues, which was really nice.
I think it's definitely important to establish a good relationship with your landlord early on and respond to their requests quickly as well, so that if something big does come up, you know that you have that good relationship and they'll respond to you quickly. The night before my civil procedure final last year, I just got done working out, went to take a shower, and our shower's faucet had a leak that was flooding into our hallway outside of the bathroom. The last thing anybody wants to do the night before a big exam, right? But we were lucky. Our landlord, Joel, was very responsive. He was over there that evening, fixed it as best he could that night, and was able to bring a contractor in for later the next day to fix the problem entirely. And I think a lot of that was because I had a good relationship with Joel early on, and we texted and emailed back and forth and were responsive to each other. So if you know your landlord is responsive for the small things, it's a good bet he or she will be responsive for the bigger ones as well.
And if your situations aren't quite as positive, you're welcome to reach out to us and we will kind of help you through that situation here in off-campus student living. So please know that we're a resource in those situations as well. The next question that we have is around subletting. So does your lease allow subletting, and have you sublet your space before? If so, how did you go about doing that? Was it a difficult process? Things like that.
So part of the higher education process typically involves an internship in the summer where you go work in either housing or orientation. And so I moved to New Mexico for 3 months and was able to sublet my space. And luckily we did have an attic, and so I was able to keep most of my belongings there, as I obviously didn't drive to New Mexico. Um, and then, so I was able to have a sublet that we didn't do any sort of like formal documentation. My name was still on the lease, but we worked together to come up with a payment plan, and just kind of both had a mutual understanding about what that would be. They paid a security deposit just as I did, and then they moved out 2 days before I got back. Um, and so I found a sublet within a week of posting it. They tend to go pretty quickly, or at least they used to, before pre-coronavirus. I know that there are several different sorts of institutions that have internship opportunities around the Boston area. So I think it would just depend like what you're looking for as far as who is in your space. My roommates were really adamant that they did not want an undergrad in our space, given it was part professional, part grad student as well. So that was kind of tricky. A lot of the subletters tended to be younger, but we were able to find another grad student to be in that space, and she was lovely.
So my lease says no subletters, and all of us stayed for throughout the 2 years. But I do recommend that if you know that part of your program, you're going to have to travel for an extended time and you're going to need to sublet a place, I would bring that up to the landlord, have those conversations early before you sign your lease, because your landlord should be involved with the whole sublet process. And so some landlords, if they find out there's a subletter and they weren't in the loop about that, they may get angry because, they should know who's living, in their spaces. And so really have those conversations, or even look for leases that say subletting is okay, because there are some leases that say it's fine, while other leases are like no subletting at all.
I'm sorry, I just want to like follow up and reiterate, like we definitely told my landlord, and they said because it was such a short amount of time that they didn't want to like process like formal like subletting paperwork and transferring the leases, but definitely kept my landlord in the loop the whole time. And Chamba, that's a super good point. You never just want to have someone in your space that isn't supposed to be there, regardless if that's a partner that isn't technically on the lease or if that's a subletter that isn't supposed to be there either.
Yeah, and on that point, oh, I'm sorry, Chamba. On that point, to both Chamba and Shannon's notes there, your lease can be terminated if you are not in compliance with subleasing policies, or if you have somebody who's just living with you that's not on the lease for an extended period of time. So you need to know that there can be consequences for that.
Yeah, and just to go off of that, what Andrew said, from my experience working in the office, a lot of the landlords just really want to know who's living in their space, have like a physical contract signed, and honestly know who's going to keep paying the bills for the apartment. And so most of the time it's just for them to just be in the loop and have that communication between your landlord and yourself. And we've seen students who had landlords that said no to subleasing, and then they turned it around because of the way that the students were communicating about the process and looping in the landlord.
So one thing I'd like to note as well is that you can actually post your sublet listing on the off-campus housing database. So as students, you can do that for free. It's a way for you to connect with other students around the city of Boston at neighboring institutions, as well as here at BC. So you're able to try and get out your posting that way as well. So again, that's offcampushousing.bc.edu. As we kind of approach the end of our time together, we've got a couple of logistical questions here around transportation. So do you have a car? Is it possible to live in Boston without a car? And is BC accessible by public transportation?
I do have a car. I grew up in a fairly rural part of upstate New York, so I was used to driving, and I was able to bring that over to Boston with me. The Newton campus, where the law school is, does have pretty sizable parking lots, and a lot of law students do drive. However, not all do, and a lot of us take public transportation. If you are living in the Brighton or Alston or Cleveland Circle areas, public transportation is very accessible. There is a BC shuttle that will take you both to the main campus, and then a shuttle that will take you to the law campus, the Newton campus as well. And there are certainly transportation options through the T or Boston's Metro subway system.
I have no car, just a city girl living her life. So I really rely on the BC shuttle to go to and from school, and I use public transportation. Boston's public transportation is super easy to understand. I felt like the second day I already knew how to get to places because it's so simple. It's like, if you live in New York, or I've ever visited New York, it's so simple compared to New York. It just makes sense. And so it's really common to use public transportation. A lot of students who live in the Bryan area will use the Green Line. Like John said, the BC shuttle, there's many stops. You can always live somewhere, walk to the shuttle stop to hop on a bus and head over to main campus. And so big fan of public transportation. I know BC, I think it's through the Graduate Student Life. They have, I think, a discount or something like that if you purchase it before the start of each semester. I think it's about 15% off. You know, it's cheaper. And so if you're interested in that, that's another way. And it's unlimited rides per month.
I did bring my car. I had an assistantship off campus that was in the Waltham area. And so in order to get to that, it would be best if I were to drive. It was a kind of weird and indirect public transit option from Alston to Waltham. But absolutely, if I did not have that, bringing my car would have felt a little silly just because of where I was on the Green Line. Definitely able to navigate in public transit.
Just a one-word answer, or more than one if you would like, but is public transport safe in the city of Boston, and is the area surrounding Boston College a safe place to live?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a really, Chestnut Hill is a safer, you know, neighborhood, of course, compared to other parts of Boston. That being said, doesn't mean you're fully safe and that you shouldn't be aware of your surroundings and X, Y, and Z. So it's really great that public transportation does run pretty late and that the BC show does run pretty late until 2 a.m. to really, in my opinion, you really protect the students in that sense. And so, yeah, I would say it's fairly safe, but also it's the city, so just, you know, make sure to take care of yourself.
Yeah. So I want to kind of skip the last couple of questions. One of them was about Boston winters here. It is possible to live in Boston through the snow. It's an experience also. Hang in, buckle up. And how to create great relationships with your neighbors. Notably, we just think that it's best that you get to know your neighbors. A lot of the folks that you're living around are longtime residents who've been here year after year, probably living in the house they grew up with. And so they want to get to know you, and you should want to get to know them, right? So really, really encourage you to build those community bonds with your neighbors. What that might look like in the time of coronavirus is rather unclear for us at this point in time, but nonetheless, there's ways to connect with your neighbors. So I'd like to turn it over to Melissa to ask some of the questions that have been submitted, and then we will break here for a little short break.
Hi, everyone. So we got some awesome questions in the chat. So one question I have for the panel is, have you navigated to find housing that might be in a more inexpensive area? And if you have done this, what sort of options were available to you?
I believe my rent was pretty reasonable compared to what it could have been. In the Alston Brighton area, I paid $750 for my room in one of 4-bedroom apartments. That probably would be more now, as rent tends to go up maybe $20 or $30 per month a year. But given the proximity to campus as well as just like the neighborhood I was in, that worked within my budget as well. I think if you are looking, truthfully, like the further away you go from the city, I would say the less expensive it is, with some exceptions, of course. So depending on what you're willing to commit to as far as a commute, and kind of what your radius is with the vehicle versus not a vehicle, that's where the trade-offs would be if you're looking to save some cost on rent. but also in that knowing that you're still going to have to pay for the cost of either public transit, gas, like wear and tear on your vehicle. So yeah, I also would say being from Cleveland, like I did have a ton of sticker shock when it came to like what rent would be for my apartment. But that being said, like that is unfortunately what the housing market looks like out here.
Thanks, Shannon. I have another question for the group. What are some typical documents that a landlord might ask you before signing a lease? And have you had to provide financial statements in the past to a landlord?
I can answer this one as my roommate and I are actually going through this process right now. A few typical documents you might be asked to submit are a copy of your photo ID. You'll probably need to fill out a rental application, which will contain basic information, so your name, email address, basic pieces of information like that. If you are working, you may need to show some proof of income, such as a recent pay stub or something else to show that you do have a job. I think it's been mentioned earlier in this presentation, but a lot of students will need a co-signer on that lease agreement because, you know, as a full-time student, it's hard to have full-time income. So if you do have a co-signer, you will probably need a signed document by that individual that has some sort of identification for their income and their source of income as well.
Thanks so much. And another question we have is, have you been able to find apartments that are furnished, or do you mostly find apartments that are not furnished?
When I came to my apartment, I had the opportunity to buy some of the furniture off the person who was there before me, which was great because again, I was coming from Ohio and did not have furniture to bring with me. But I would say I've seen some furnished apartments. A lot of times those are posted a lot later, so you'd find those closer to the end of July and August because those people are tending to leave a little quicker. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks so much. Those are all the questions that we sort of got into the chat. I think Andrew also has a couple questions he had, and so he's going to address them now.
Shelby, did you have something to add there at the last moment?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to have give a quick tip about furniture. Like Shannon said, people who were previously living in your apartment, they may be selling furniture, or you know, because everyone's moving out August 31st and people are all moving in September 1st, a lot of people are selling their furniture for very cheap on Facebook. Honestly, some of them are putting their furniture outside. There's something called like Alston Christmas that is like literally people just putting all their furniture or items that they don't want for free for people to look through. It's completely normal, but if you're looking to not purchase new furniture, I highly recommend Facebook, Alston Christmas, or even Court Furniture. I know they have rental prices for their furniture that they can deliver and pick up for you.
Exactly. And Court is actually our first presenter of the second half of today's program. So you'll be able to hear about that, as well as about some internet options through Starry Internet. And of course, with our rental agencies as well. We did have one question around how to potentially introduce clauses related to coronavirus. I would recommend that you take a look at our off-campus housing website for any recommendations around searching in the time of coronavirus. It is a challenging situation that you're in. I think now it is probably a little less likely that any landlords or property management companies are going to be willing to introduce some of those clauses, given that Father Leahy has expressed the intention of the university to open for on-campus classes on August 31st. With that said, it is always good to ask and see what can be introduced into the lease agreement. At minimum, you need to be entering into a conversation with your property management company or your landlord around what would happen if the university were to go remote, what accommodations could be made, if anything. At the end of the day, however, know that if the university were to go to remote, which is not our plan or intention, you are in a separate private contract through that lease agreement with your landlord or your property management company, and you are required to pay the monthly rent as expressed in that contractual agreement. So did want to touch on that, as it is a common question. So again, refer you to our off-campus housing website for some of those questions, how to get the answers to those, as well as some of our general frequently asked questions. It's a pretty robust page. So with that, I want to thank our panelists. So thank you, Chamba, Shannon, and John, for your time today. I truly appreciate it. And I hope this information has been beneficial for our incoming students. I certainly think it has.